Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
If you're afraid to open the door because there might be a bear there, that's anxiety. But if you open the door and there's a bear there, that's fear. You know, learning the difference between the two things. What bear have you created for yourself? If you open that door, do you think, you know what I'm saying? And save it for when there's really a bear at the door. Save your fears.
Hi, I'm Jessie Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And we have an interview that we have been waiting to share with you guys today.
Oh, we are so excited about this interview.
This interview checks off multiple fandom boxes for us.
And hopefully for you, whether you love musical theater or you love television or you love movies, this is an interview for you.
We are speaking with the Joanna Gleason.
Tony winner, Joanna Gleason.
Joanna is one of those people that you know from so many things. We have highlights from so many that we couldn't even cover with her, but a few might be.
You might know her from The West Wing, from Boogie Nights, from Friends, from, as above mentioned, Tony Award-winning role in Into the Woods.
We think you're going to really enjoy this interview. And please, when you're done listening, don't forget to come and interact and follow us on social media. We're at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Murphy Brown Pod.
Yeah, let us know what you thought and join us in the discussion. Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Hello. This is Joanna Gleason coming to you from Tiny Farm.
Which is your lovely home.
Which is our lovely home. And thank you for coming here.
Thank you for having us.
A pleasure.
Yes. It's a nice mix-up for us location-wise. I get a new background to see from Chicago, and Lauren gets to move around.
That's right. And pick tomatoes.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
Ooh, nice.
So we always like to start with your origin story. In any way that you would like to
It's
talk
a girl, Mr. Hall. I mean, how far back do you want to go?
Well, that's pretty far back.
That's pretty far back. Let's not go that far back. Born in Toronto, raised in Westchester, New Rochelle, New York, moved to California when my dad's work took him to California. My dad, as many people know, was Monty Hall, and he was in radio and then television, and then sort of very famously in television with a show that is on to this day.
Yes.
Thank you, Wayne Brady, and thank you, CBS.
Do you want to maybe tell our younger listeners what that show is?
It's called Let's Make a Deal. And what's interesting is I got to see the pilot. My dad and mom both passed away 2 years ago, very close together. And they were very old, 96 and 90. And we were walking down memory lane, my sister and brother and I, and we watched the pilot of Let's Make a Deal where nobody was in funny costumes. They were in little black dresses and pearls and suits and ties. And what happened, it was 1963. And then the world started to change. Kennedy was assassinated, and then there was the Vietnam War, and there were hippies and protesters and the Beatles, and people started to shed the conventions of the 50s really, and 60s, and people started dressing up to get attention, to be chosen to be on the trading floor. And that's what happened. That's nothing they ever intended.
I didn't put that together, but that makes sense that if you really want to get picked, you're going to start to dress in a way that gets you attention.
Yes, exactly.
That's so funny. That's actually growing up in the 80s and then the 90s. That's what I knew the show for.
Right. You wouldn't have known.
It was the show with the costumes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Its humble origins.
So artistically, what from your growing up do you think led you to where you are today? You know, that's kind of the origins that we like, because we're both artists, obviously. And we find it fascinating as part of your origins to see, you know, what either influences or, you know, was there music around when you were growing up?
Yes. My Sundays, which is why Sundays are actually kind of hard now that they've gone, but Sundays, there was always an album playing, you know, remember albums? There was, I mean, literally an album, a 33 and a third, of classical music or music from Broadway shows. And they took us to the theater. You know, we lived in New Rochelle, 45 minutes from Broadway, and we saw shows when I was 9, when I was 11, you know, and those are very informative years. For me, one of the shows that I saw was How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying with Robert Morse and Rudy Vallée. And then when I was, you know, in my, I guess, 20s or something, I was in the revival of it with Robert Morse and Rudy Vallée in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Yeah, that was quite a trip. But I remember thinking that there was a world on stage there where people could be many people where they could reinvent themselves. And since we moved so much when I was a kid, I was constantly kind of reinventing myself. Well, that worked that time. Now maybe I'll be less of a dork in this school, and maybe I won't be afraid to be, the smart one in this one or the funny one. And it was like putting together like a Mrs. Potato Head, but it was actually advantageous as an artist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you, when you were looking at, growing up with the proximity of Broadway, but then also having your father in film and television production, did you have a leaning either way with where you wanted to go as a performer? Because I know you from all avenues, from all media. Would you say that you initially wanted to be on stage or behind a camera?
On stage only. Really. Under the big umbrella of show business, my mom had been in radio and had been a model and had done radio in Canada as an actress. She was also the hands on Perry Como's Craft. Was it Craft? Variety Hour where they would show you the advertisement for Philadelphia cream cheese or Kraft cream cheese. That was my mom's hands. She was pregnant with me, spreading the cream cheese on the bread and showing that it doesn't tear, which was funny because they were using vanilla pudding, she said, because the cream cheese tore the bread. But there was the entertainment industry all around, but nobody I knew was in the theater. And it was my exposure to going to the theater, which made me say, that's for me.
There's still a little magic involved there.
Yes, there's magic, and also there's a kind of depth of storytelling, and it's live. There's somebody right there that you can relate to or love or hate or, aspire to be, or somebody whose performance literally takes your breath away right there.
Yeah.
And that never happened to me watching television back in the day. The movies I liked as a kid growing up were all the black and white movies from the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. So I was, kind of a different time. And that acting in the black and white movies most closely resembled to me the honesty that I found when I went to the theater.
Mm-hmm. There's something very theatrical about the black and white that is, you see it as, I think, as a bridge between theater and what we see now on film and television, with the ability to use spectacle and not rely too much on the medium itself to tell the story. That's the actors are very key to black and white film.
They are indeed. And because it is black and white, there are literally shades of gray. Mm-hmm. So the performances seem more nuanced, to me, and they can do less. It's not so literal. They can show you more with their eyes and lighting. Oh my God, the brilliant cinematographers of that time. And Lauren and I were speaking before. Yes, I've spoken to her before I met you. Yes. Sorry.
It's okay. I understand.
I confess. The fact that there are those, black spaces between the frames in 35 millimeter and particularly in black and white films where there's that, you can't really clock it with your eye, but you feel the absence of anything happening so that you can feel something. Mm-hmm. You feel the depth. And there's depth. There's some great television on now. There's some great, particularly on cable, some fantastic stories, beautifully shot and beautifully acted. I don't really find it on network television anymore with the relentless thumping soundtracks and the kind of generic acting. Yes. There are exceptions, but really, I'm like, we're more hooked on watching what's on cable or the occasional movie that comes out than regular television.
You can take risks on cable, I think. I think that's the thing that's exciting about it. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So what brought you to New York?
My dad got a job when we were living in Toronto, and I was 5, and he moved us down to Mount Vernon because what was he doing? He did a show called Monitor. He substituted for, during the quiz show scandal, the 21 scandal, when it was Jack Barry, right? That was his name?
Oh, yes.
The host. Everybody kind of had to flee or freeze while that was being investigated. But the show went on and Dad came in as a kind of interim host. Oh. And then he started making the rounds and he got this show called Video Village, but it was out in California. So he moved to California while we stayed in New York. Yeah. And then he came back. He'd come back and forth. That was hard and crazy. Then he and a partner, Stefan Haydas, created this show called Let's Make a Deal, and that moved us out to California.
More steady work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still on.
It's amazing.
It's a really fun show. Honestly, I watched it the other day. I was like, oh, this thing that I thought was a relic from my childhood is still going, and I adore it.
It's still
It's
going.
really fun.
Yeah.
I'm happy that game shows in general just seem to be coming back.
Well, the thing about game shows is that they are more reality TV than reality TV.
Yeah.
Reality TV is essentially scripted and it's manipulated and it's edited and nobody's behaving in any way, shape, or form like a real human being. Just they know there's a camera there, so it changes the behavior. But on the game shows, they forget about the camera. They're there to play the game. And so you see people, and I love Jeopardy. Jeopardy.
Oh, yes.
That's like, stop the presses. We have to watch Jeopardy.
I will spend far too much time watching Jeopardy and trying to play along and feeling really good about myself until about halfway through.
Yeah. Well, we shout out the answers, but if I don't say what is, then Chris gets all upset.
It's the rule. You have to follow the structure.
Yeah.
I don't do that, so I'm very impressed. I want to get it out as fast as possible, and I'm usually alone, so that is a little doesn't make that much sense, but
it's fine. Yeah. My cats judge me if I don't say what is. It's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I will from now on. I've learned my lesson.
So something we talk about a lot for our listeners is for the two of us as actors, we're very familiar with the longevity of career and that it's not just an overnight sensation that happens. What was it like for you getting into that field as a career? Did you have a moment that you felt like you had the big break, or was it a slower burn as you went?
You don't feel the momentum because you know that every job is going to end, essentially. So I think that I think I knew it was a career when the jobs came closer together, and when the phone rang, more often, or when shows I was on lasted a little longer, or I could go from show to show. But I learned, and this was very important for me to learn, and I didn't learn it until I was in my close to 40, is that I had to stop thinking of the times when I wasn't working as downtime. When somebody says, what do you do in your downtime? I go, no. That's my life.
Yeah.
It's not down. It's not a pause. It's not a lull. It's not a deficit. It's my life. And unless you build a real life, you're going to be unhappy when you're not working. And that's just, to me, unforgivable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure that out myself.
One must figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, that's the key to longevity, I think, is that if you're going for just these single moments when you're working, you're missing the whole.
You are. I mean, to me, you can be over the moon ecstatic when you're working, and I have been. And yes, you become like a family, with this theater group or that theater group. Never in the movies or TV, you don't feel that, but you do when you're doing a play or a musical. You're in the trenches together, and then you go home. And you just have to, for me, there was no true happiness until I couldn't wait to get home.
Mm-hmm. I think I forget who said the quote, but there's about acting's one of the only careers where as soon as you get a job, you start looking for the next one.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that just does hellish things to your nervous system. You know what I mean? But I
have to try and explain to people that auditioning is essentially job interviews, consistent job interviews. You just don't interview every 5 years. You interview every day sometimes.
Well, my Chris Sarandon, my husband, his daughter Alexis was playing at a friend's house, and she was very, very young, and the mother said to her own daughter, tell Alexis what daddy does. And that little girl said, oh, my daddy's a fireman. And then the mother said to Alexis, and what does your daddy do? And Alexis said, he looks for work.
Oh,
all from the mouth of babes.
Yeah, because that's essentially our job. Yeah.
Well, speaking of musical theater, you are considered by many to be a legend of the stage.
A legend?
An
urban myth?
I definitely broke the VHS of Into the Woods when I was a child.
Same.
That's great.
What is for you the difference between acting for stage and acting for musical theater? Because a lot of people don't realize that there is a different skill set and approach that can happen with that particular endeavor.
Oh, there's not really. I mean, look, in a musical, you are obliged to, learn the songs and learn what the songs are about and learn how they relate to the scene that went before and how they carry the action forward to the next scene. And you have to be able to perhaps dance at the same time or move, but it's the same. You're just telling a story in a different way. And I didn't think I had any particularly different skill sets other than to get my voice in shape for 8 shows a week, which is, I don't know how people do it. But if you're not really a good actor, no matter how great a voice you have, you're not going to really be any better in a musical, is my humble opinion. IMHO, as they say. In my humble opinion, is that it? Acting is acting, and yes, there are great singers and then there are okay singers, and there are people who you don't mind following them while they sing, even if they're not the big, voices of our time. And I'm certainly not one of those big voices of our time, never was. But I know that I have sung in character and what the character needed and I could do that, but I never stopped thinking as the character. I never stopped thinking, in character while navigating, key changes and dance moves. It's just there's a few more things you have to coordinate. It's all about just coordinating the stuff you should already have in your hip pocket.
When you were working on Into the Woods, could you tell that it was going to be such an amazing show, or is it you don't know when you're working on something because you're just working it?
I think we knew, and we took it to San Diego, and then changes were made after San Diego before Broadway. But my God, you're there with Steve Sondheim and James Lapine, and actually I had just seen, not too long before doing Into the Woods, I had seen Sunday in the Park, and I just thought, my God, this is the world. This is the world that I want to be in, and then I got to be with those two men. And then there's Nick and Nora, the musical by Arthur Lawrence with a score by Charlie Strauss, and Richard Maltby did the lyrics, and we just had a feeling it was going to fall down around our ears, and it did. It did. And I said this before, if you watch Game of Thrones in the finale, remember Cersei and Jaime are clinging to each other and the whole thing falls down? That's what it felt like. Chris and I were we knew because nothing got fixed. Oh, and we previewed in town and nothing got fixed. So, yeah.
You can feel it. You can feel it in a production. I think that is something, harkening back to you saying when you're in a theater production, you get the time to kind of create that community. You feel it from each other. You're not just...
No, you can't hide it. It's like when people come backstage and go, oh, wow. You just go, oh, well, I'm so... What kind of language restrictions do you have here? Any?
Oh, well, you can say anything you want because we'll just bleep you.
It's you're going to bleep it? Oh, then it's not worth it. But we just knew. And And, when you go out and word of mouth has spread because you've been previewing already for like a month and a half, and you have a bullseye painted on your tuchus and you just hear the arrows whizzing past you all night. Like, oh my God, we're so bleeped.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand the idea that opening night is not truly opening for you guys. You've been either doing tech elsewhere, you've been doing previews, like you've been hearing for a while. Opening night is just it's a different concept than the first time everybody sees you.
Opening night was a wake. Do you know what I mean? Opening night, we went to Sardi's, and we're at the party at Sardi's when the New York Times used to come out around 11 o'clock at night or something. The review would come out, and here you are, and people are kind of looking at you and not looking at you, and everybody's eating and walking past you. And I was there and Chris was there, and his kids were there, and my son was there with his father, and my ex-husband were there with his kids, who were my ex-stepkids, and his ex-wife with her soon-to-be husband. And we were all there together in this lifeboat at Sardi's when suddenly the review came out and the place cleared. Oh, and there we sat at the table, just us and a waiter,
And just for our audience who maybe not be musical theater mavens like Jesse and I are, as we were speaking, I just want to tell everybody the cast of this, other than yourself and your husband, Chris Sarandon, was Barry Bostwick, Deborah Monk, Christine Baranski, and Faith Prince.
Yeah. Yes. And Ramak Ramsey and Tom Sesma. And it just went on and on. It was not our fault at all. And later, many years later, Arthur, who also directed it, copped to it not being in the best shape it could have been as a book. And then I thought the direction also was unclear, and it needed cutting, and it needed a lot of things. that said, and for those of you who don't know, Nick and Nora was based on the 1930s movies The Thin Man,
Which
William
I love,
Powell and
yeah.
Myrna Loy, and their little dog Asta, they two high society New York people who solved murders. And it could have been, but when you go to see Nick and Nora, in your mind you're seeing William Powell and Myrna Loy, and you're hearing that kind of basic story. And this was very complicated and convoluted and too many plots, and it never got off the ground. Except Chris and I got together.
Yeah, so happy
Something good came out of that.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about working with James Lapine and Stephen Sondheim as collaborators?
They have a deep and wonderful respect for each other and working relationship. And if something needed to be fixed, James is very visual also, so the pictures he creates and the story he tells, they're spare. Do you know what I mean? The language and the dialogue, it's spare, it's funny, it's true. And Steve's lyrics are true and smart. And we knew that if we ran a scene and it wasn't working, and we weren't sure because the material was always so good, that they would know. There's this kind of faith in knowing that you're in the best hands. They know what to cut. They know what doesn't work. They know what needs to get rewritten. And then the genius is, with both of them, they can rewrite it. They know what to rewrite. There are some people who make no changes because they're putting their foot down, or the fact is they don't know what to do next. But the thing about genius is somebody's definition of genius is someone who can do it every day. And that's, they may disagree with me, but that's James and that's Steve.
I think there's something that makes me I work a lot with new play development, and something that always makes me nervous are people who are precious with their books, especially, and that when they're unwilling to cut or unwilling to change something, that's when I get nervous. Not when a lot needs to be done. It's the reaction of refusal and that fear of cutting.
Right. Exactly.
That's what makes me nervous. Exactly.
Because I've written a solo show that we've done at Feinstein's 54 Below. And I did one about 6 years ago. It was very autobiographical, and I brought up some guest stars and sang from the obligatory songs from shows I've been in, sort of that. But it had also some kind of more narrative written and sort of fantasy sequences in it. But this is very different. And my music director, Jeffrey Kleitz, he felt sure enough and smart enough, he is, to say to me, you don't need that. Cut this. Yeah. This is better here. No, that's from another show. That's not the show you're writing. And I thought, I love this. I love collaboration. I just love it. I love getting notes. I love getting notes because there's always something I can't see, that somebody has seen. And then there are people who have their opinions that they're just like wild. And I just go, well, that person's an idiot, clearly. So I'll just ignore that. But there are so many people in my immediate circle, my sister and my brother-in-law, and they're writers and producers and directors, and my husband, that I get a note, and I'm thrilled.
Yeah, feedback is an art, and not everybody knows how to do that art very well. It took me a little bit to learn that, and it was so important to go, oh, okay, you know what, this thing over here, that doesn't work. And that's not me being stubborn, but this does. This feedback is very helpful.
Yeah, and there's an art to being a dramaturg, and there's an art to being an editor. Do you know? Visually editing, think of it as the person who sits down and edits your narrative. They're doing the same thing. They're cutting it and shaping it with you based on what you've given them. So in a way, it's praising you for giving them all that raw material. It's like being a fantastic seamstress. You know what to cut away. Yeah. Or a sculptor. You know what to take away.
Well, one of my favorite New York up-and-coming playwrights, his name is Peter Turo, is one of my favorite writers to work with because he will write an okay first draft. You will give him feedback, and he will hack it and just go to town because what he wants is to collaborate for the best piece possible. And that ability to be able to maintain your own voice and your own approach, but also take the feedback and work collaboratively. One of my favorite things about as an actor is when I get feedback means I'm not alone in this anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And you're not left alone on a lifeboat trying to figure it out.
Exactly. And, in the theater, I have found there are so many actors who are so deeply intelligent and wise. And the older we get and the more experience we have, there are actors who know. I had the blessing of doing a play by Stephen Karam called The Humans. I'm sorry, not The Humans. We were in Sons of the Prophet. He wrote The Humans. We were in Sons of the Prophet, Santino Fontana. And
I saw you in that. That was why I said yes, because I remember. Yeah, it was lovely.
Great play.
Yeah.
But we did it in Boston. And then, Stephen is the playwright, so secure. And he was just, I don't know, he was 26 at the time or something. And he came and said, how does this feel? And I said, I just think this can all go. I don't think. And he went away. And he came up with something 10 times better, because sometimes you have to ask the people who are wearing those clothes and carrying that story, what feels, what can you discard over the side and that kind of thing. And he's one of them, tremendously secure in that. And that was kind of thrilling for me, from one so young who could have been precious about everything, but wasn't.
I love that you brought that play up, because it's when I saw you in that, I saw you in Normal Heart.
Wow.
Yeah. And but as I was putting together sort of a timeline, sort of to remind us of all the wonderful things that you've done, that came to mind along with your role in Boogie Nights and Skeleton Twins, because you played sort of this string of, we would say, terrible mothers.
Yes, terrible mothers. Terrible mothers are us, like toys are us. Like, yes, right.
But starting with your experience on Boogie Nights, which I think a lot of people probably, other than the West Wing, would know you from.
That once again, Paul Thomas Anderson was maybe 26 or 27 when he did that movie. And it's not an audition I would have expected to come to me, because I had done Broadway and comedy and musicals, and I have no idea how I ended up in that room, but I read for him and I thought, wow, there wasn't a word I said on screen, not an epithet or anything that wasn't what he had already written. I mean, he wrote it in such, it was effortless to learn, and it was freeing. And I had a great time. I only worked 3 days on that movie, but I mean, it's funny. People said, "Oh, I just hated you in that." I said, "No, you didn't hate me. You hated the woman." And is it hard to play someone so mean? I went, every single mother I know has that in her. You know what I mean? I not that I've seen it on display anywhere. It's just you're an actor. You have an imagination. You have to. It's on the page. Do what's on the page.
Yeah, I have also noticed, as somebody who just loves a delicious villain, they're just fun, or a complicated person, and imperfect. I have found generally that the nicest people I know play the meanest characters.
Well, that's it. It's yes, I've heard that a lot too. But here's the thing. Generally, you don't think of yourself as a villain. The character does not think of herself as a villain. She's put upon. She's trapped in a corner. Her life is horrible. She's made every mistake in the world and is trying to cover. She's clueless. She's, never wanted kids. For whatever story, and you don't have to go off and write a biography for your character. I actually don't believe in that. I think everything in a good script is right there. It's right there. Do you know what I mean? If it's a bad script and you've said yes for your insurance or mortgage money, and I've done them.
Real.
If it's a mediocre script, you have to imbue the character with something real.
Well, and I think that's the key to the kind people I know who play quote unquote bad characters so well, is that there's an intrinsic empathy to these people. And every character thinks that they are the hero of their story. And these actors I know who have just excess of empathy for other people are able to look at these characters and find that heart and play them with kindness, as opposed to somebody who just looks at them on the page and just plays a cartoon villain.
Right. And there are people who are irredeemable, and there are people who have no heart and who really are incapable of empathy. It's been bred out of them, and you have to play those people too. And you can't, by the way, fight for sympathy. You can't even leak out that your character needs to be, sympathized with, because no, and not in this assignment. This assignment is no, straight up terrible person. You just, that's your job.
Real quickly, I read something about your audition for Boogie Nights that really took my breath away a bit, actually. I don't know if you remember the story, but something that you said to him after the audition.
Oh, I think I asked him if his mother was like this.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And he was so jet lagged, and he may have just kind of answered, but he may have nodded slightly. And I said, I think I cut him off, and I said, because if she is, then you never have to forgive her.
And that really was so beautiful. And I think sometimes we forget that, we want to be able to forgive, but sometimes there are people in our life that it's unhealthy.
I'm a big believer in not tearing layers of flesh and well-being off of oneself by hanging on to rage and old injustices and things.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when you just say, no, don't forgive, don't forget, and move on. Mostly I forgive because as an actor, I try to think, well, what were they going through at the time? Where did this come from? Oh, look at their life. Oh, look at what button you pushed or whatever. And there are ways around it. But I don't dwell on that, because that kind of debris, to hang on to that kind of old debris, will make my body go through some of the same stuff it went through at the time it was happening. And that kind of recall, if you're a highly tuned instrument or a high strung instrument, is just not healthy. It's just not healthy. I would rather move forward. I can incorporate that into a character someday that I'm writing. I do a lot of writing now, and it's useful. It's like a therapeutic use of crap. You've had crap in your life. You've had curses placed on you at birth, whatever. This is your emotional and creative artistic property. Mm-hmm. And by the way, she said, in answer to nothing in particular, any director or person in charge or teacher who wants to know the absolute locus of your pain, I think that is not acceptable. I don't think going after and traumatizing you again or making you relive trauma is not the place that's for your therapist or your spiritual advisors. I think that anybody who makes you so wildly uncomfortable that they think they have to torture you or get you to torture yourself in order to get a result in a play or in a classroom or in a performance, should go bleep themselves, because it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. You can explain it better, what you want from them. You can direct them better. You can teach them better so that they will want to come forward and show a side that comes from someplace private in them. I do not need to know where. It's none of my business.
Exactly.
It's really none of my business. Mm-hmm. And so I say this to all the people. I've been teaching for 30 years. If somebody comes at you with, I have to see your most intimate moment, I have to see it. And you go, well, that's not applicable. It's not in this, then stand up for yourself and say, no, show me another way. I'll get to it another way, but you're the one in charge. You show me how.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd love to, we've been talking a lot about theater, but there's also, and this, one of the reasons that we reached out to you is because of your work in television and film. And what was your transition into television and film from theater?
I had done a little bit here and there, but when I went to do I Love My Wife, my first Broadway musical was in New York. I was married and living in California, so I came back to California, back to Los Angeles when it was over, like 14 months later. And I thought, well, now what do I do? I mean, was no theater scene really to speak of. And I auditioned because now I had this Broadway credit, so I was getting some auditions, and I auditioned for a show called Hello, Larry.
We have talked about that show on this
yes.
podcast.
Oh.
There's a joke about it in the first season of Murphy Brown.
I'm not the least bit surprised. Do you remember what the joke was?
I don't remember. What was the joke?
Oh, shoot.
It was definitely something about the reception, something since,
Since Hello, Larry.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I did the pilot, and then it was tossed out because they wanted to change leading men, and so they shot the pilot again with a new leading man, and then that was tossed out because that didn't work. And by now I was pregnant with my son, and we were doing another pilot with McLean Stevenson, and I was getting bigger and bigger. And at some point, you'll notice there's an episode where I'm literally carrying a huge potted plant. Or practically moving a filing cabinet across the room. So the transition was relatively painless. I just got lucky. I got lucky.
So I also noticed I've been going through, at first I was listing all the things that I knew you from, and I was like, wow, I just have too many to list, so I'm going to stop listing. But I noticed I'm very intrigued by your year in 1986 with Hannah and Her Sisters and Heartburn in the same year.
Heartburn with Mike Nichols and Meryl Streep. Yes, that was fun. I had a couple of days shooting on that. That's because I had worked with Mike. I had replaced, I had been the standby for the leads in The Real Thing and got actually to go on in both roles, the Glenn Close role and Sarah and Christine Baranski's role, but by then it was Sarah Botsford and Caroline Lagerfeld. Yes, it was kind of as the casts were changing over, and I got to go on for both of them, and then I think that yes, then Hannah and Her Sisters was that around? Yeah, so you're in New York and you're doing a play for Mike Nichols and you're doing a movie for Woody Allen, and life feels pretty good.
Yeah, not too shabby. Those casts are not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, and we've talked about The Real Thing before because Yardley Smith, who also understudied it, was a guest star on Murphy Brown, and we talked about her career. And there's so many stories about The Real Thing, particularly Cynthia Nixon doing two shows at the same time.
I think she's doing Hurly Burly at the same time.
There's so much overlap that we've had of things that we've discussed that our audience will recognize.
Well, the theater community is a very kind of everybody knows everybody on campus. Do you know what I mean? And there were times we'd all mingle and barbecue out back of one of the theaters on Wednesdays between shows. And we'd have, when we were doing Social Security, Marlo Thomas, the late Ron Silver, Olympia Dukakis, Stefan Schnabel, and I, and Kenny Welch. Sundays, we would come early. You've just done, 7 shows, but Sunday morning we would do brunch downstairs in the basement where the wardrobe people were. And there were theme brunches. There would be, this is all Hawaiian, and sometimes there were decorations, or this one is pancakes and bacon. You do things. Even in Sons of the Prophet, we had Christmas fun and latkes and, and I brought Santa in I literally brought Santa Claus in. Yes. As somebody's secret Santa. I brought Santa. You have fun. I never remember having fun on a television show because it's a long day and it moves slowly, really. And then you go home because you're tired. And you have a new show to do the next week. Yeah. So, and I don't remember in the movies never being in one long enough, having a significant enough role so that there was all of that kind of, camaraderie.
So how did Love and War come your way?
I auditioned. Nick and Nora closed with a thud. And Chris and I said, we're going to go to LA and see what we can do, see what work there is there. And my son had been living with his dad for a while in LA, so we were going to make a kind of like shift and reblend the family. And we had, $0, and we were living with Chris's brother in his condo at the marina with the cats and waking up with a cat on your head. And, God love them, everybody. But we were not doing too well. And it was a kind of really low, depressing time for me because even in a flop, you're in the high of the theater. You're in that community and with all those people that and it was New York. And coming back to Los Angeles, my folks were there and my siblings were there, but I just felt like I was in exile, really. I felt like I was being punished for something. And apart from all the personal family stuff that was great to reconnect, there was really not much work. I wasn't landing anything, and by now I'm in my 40s. I'm 41 or 42, and TV is younger, or more established. Movie people are coming back to TV, and things were changing. And then I got this audition. I got a call to audition for Diane English Murphy Brown's Diane English is doing another show called Love and War. And I auditioned in a room full of the happiest, funniest writers and the most pleasant experience I had had in a long time. And, when you make somebody laugh at an audition, you feel, well, that went well. And then I got it. And that changed everything. It changed our ability to live, to move out of his brother's condo and to rent a tiny little place in the hills. And, and everything sort of built from there.
So for anyone who hasn't watched the show, which by the way is now streaming all 3 seasons on Amazon. So our audience
is?
Yes. Every single episode is now up there free with Amazon Prime.
Wow.
How would you describe Nadine?
Well, Nadine was definitely at one point, Diane said to me, no, you've come too far down the sawmill. Go back up to Westchester. She said, she's not hip. She's one of these women, who had her life in order, sort of like this. And then her husband gets carted off, to jail, and she has nothing, and she has to find herself again. And here she's put in the middle of these hip, young New Yorkers and characters, and she's working as a waitress, the last place she thought she'd ever be. So she's adorable, really. And I must say, that was a cast to love. And also, I spent 3 years with them, so that's the longest I'd ever spent with anybody in television. And then first it was Susan Day, and then Annie Potts came in. And Annie and I had toured in 1976 in Charlie's Aunt with Vincent Price and Roddy McDowell and Coral Brown. And we I adore this woman. And Jay Thomas, just the best. And Joel Murray. And Susie Plaxon, and the late John Hancock was in it. Susie and I would just hang out together endlessly. And that was a cast and the directors they brought in were fantastic. All of them. So I had a really good time. I had a really good time. And we all had a really good time.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular stories that you remember that you'd like to tell us?
There were 2.
Yeah.
One is that there was an episode called Nadine Sings the Blues.
Oh, yes.
I just remember.
Yes. I forgot about that.
Diane, it might have been Mark Flanagan who wrote it. I'm not sure. But Diane said, I want you to wear this dress. Nadine gets quite drunk and sings it. She's sort of singing it like an open mic kind of thing. And I did sing a song. It might have been, I can't remember if it was Bridge Over Troubled Water. So it was something crazy and drunk. She had me wear this rubber dress. It was purple and yellow with a big flouncy skirt tied on top, a big flouncy skirt, I think bare arms. I think it was like a scuba outfit, but a dress.
I don't remember that.
And feathers. And it was and high heels. I hadn't, you wait when you're not the lead character, you wait until the series is established enough and the characters are established enough that you can break out and do something that's fun for the actor. More fun for the actor, more attention on that part. You can't do it right up front. There's too much to service, too much story to service. And so this happened, and I just had the best time. But the other thing is, Diane English, I expressed my desire to direct, and she said, come with me to the editing room, and she showed me how to watch how something is put together. And in watching how it was cut together, I then went home and turned off the sound and would watch our show with the sound off to see how it was cut together, how the story progresses. And then she said, I'm going to give you an episode to direct of Love and War. And she did. And I became a director. And then when Louis Anderson had 6, an order for 6 shows at CBS, she gave me 3 of them. And so I owe her a great deal.
Well, and when we spoke to Susie, she brought up loving you as a director and wishing that there had been more later had it gone longer.
I would have loved that too. I mean, when I've been directed by actors, and it is a slightly different experience. Yeah. It's actually a very different experience.
That was what we talked about. Yeah, there's just a language that they understand that certain directors just don't.
Right. Yeah. And also where it can breathe and where you're showing something so that, in rat-tat-tat-tat sitcoms, it's beat, joke and laugh and audience and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes there's room for the actor, because they're all good, to just show you something that gets a laugh rather than have to, by not doing anything, letting it breathe for a second, doing that slow little inner monologue of what just happened that is as expressive as keeping things moving so incredibly fast. So, I like to listen as a character. I like to be the one listening, because you can show so much without making faces. You can show a great deal just by your thoughts. And, but it was an easy set to be on. It was great.
Well, and speaking of actors as directors, so when you guest starred on Murphy Brown, Joe Regalbuto was the director.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that like working with him?
Adorable.
On that side.
Just adorable because he's adorable and high energy and it flowed smoothly. And I played a sort of Ariana Huffington character. I think I might have had an accent of some sort. Yes, turning 50.
You didn't have an accent. I mean, a non-American accent, I should say.
Right.
But I was surprised watching it again. I think you played your own mother on a voicemail message?
Yes, I did.
And I hadn't noticed that the first time. And that was really funny. But anyway, continue.
No, once again, when you're with the people who are having great success and they're comfortable in their own skin, and Candace leads the way with her generosity, and her how easy and how talented, then it's a piece of cake. Same thing. I did a few episodes of Friends. Same thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew they were on a hit. They were secure. They were comfortable. There was an ease to it. It ran like a well-oiled machine.
We've talked about that Friends storyline. The smoking episode is. Yeah. We've talked about that before.
And before we continue to remind people, the episode of Murphy Brown that you were in was called Petty Woman. Was from the final season, which is when Diane did return as consultant, episode 7. And then on Friends, most people probably know you as Rachel's boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the smoking part, that is something that I feel like always seems to come up, at least before, you could smoke everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I don't smoke and I never have.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah. So I just spent the whole time going, oh, phew.
Do you feel that most people recognize you other than, I would say, the West Wing from Friends?
We were guests of somebody up, at the Cape. Up near Provincetown a few summers ago. And we went to a little restaurant to kind of just, get clams and steamers by the bucket. And much of the wait staff was from Ireland. They come over for summer jobs. And they all knew me from Friends.
It's really big in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was astonishing. We went to Paris once, and at a tiny little restaurant, somebody knew me from the Woody Allen movie.
Yeah.
From one of, or both of Woody Allen's movies. And yeah, it's whatever gets over there and plays on a loop endlessly, they start to know you.
Well, Lauren did bring it up. So I would love to ask you about any memories or experiences you have from one of our other favorite shows, which is The West Wing. I think that's might be one of the things aside from my rest in peace, my Into the Woods VHS that I just watched so many times it died. But I probably knew you best from watching The West Wing for a long time.
If you get, it's like if you get to work with Steve Sondheim or Mike Nichols, James Lapine, if you get to work with these people and doing 2 Woody Allen movies, you have something that's very precious and shiny, and you're just really lucky. The West Wing, this was Aaron Sorkin. This was a show I never missed and would watch when it was on reruns, when it would play endlessly. I would just watch and watch, and I think I did 3 or 4 of them, and mostly my things were with John Spencer.
Yeah.
And and the best directors, by the way, Tommy Schlamme and
Alex Graves?
Vince Misiano. Yes, Alex Graves and both Chris Misiano, I think, and his brother Vince Misiano. Fantastic directions. And Aaron was around. So there was John Spencer, and in film, it moves slowly. Big congressional hearing scene. We were there all day, and John and I sitting at the table together just never stopped talking about everything in the world. And then the cameras would roll, and he was perhaps the most deeply intense and focused and present actor I've ever worked with. Oh, wow. And so you feel stuff in you happening that's supposed to happen in character that you could not have planned or rehearsed. It was just a kind of alchemy, a kind of magic, and I'll never forget it.
You did 5 episodes as attorney Jordan Kendall.
Yeah.
And actually, I would say it as a West Wing fan, it means a lot to hear that. I would say Leo McGarry is probably one of my favorite characters ever put on television. Yeah. And it's such a loss to have lost John Spencer as young as he was.
It is.
I used to, one of my favorite tweets I ever made was that when Leo McGarry cries, the world cries with him.
Yes, absolutely right. He's just a heartbreakingly wonderful actor. I miss him. I miss doing a show like that, and I miss a kind of a country like that.
Yeah. I do watch it on Netflix as kind of my democratic salve sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to devolve into a discussion, but there's something about how we had the wishful thinking that things did work like that in government, but it's hard to find. But now it's closer to Veep. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's gone from West Wing to Veep, which I adore, and you just at some point you just have to laugh. This macabre kind of, look what's happened. And as my dad used to say, "Oh, it's a blip. We've seen worse." But there are times when I think I don't know if we've seen the worst.
Yeah. What's the Carrie Fisher quote? If my life wasn't funny, then it would just be real, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite Carrie Fisher quotes too.
Yes,
you need to learn how to laugh.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah, I think as humans, that's all we can do. I mean, that's also what I loved about The West Wing was that it was. I would call it a dramedy, if we're still using that word. There was such a great balance of comedy and drama, and then you and John Spencer had such great chemistry and that sort of 1940s kind of 30s dialogue back and forth.
Yes, my favorite era.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was named Jordan Elaine Kendall, and I thought, and I didn't ask Aaron this, but I thought, well, here are three of my heroes. There's Barbara Jordan, and there's Elaine May, and there's Kay Kendall. Like this. I just thought, okay, an amalgam. I'll take it.
Yeah, just take that and run with it. And it worked.
So how was the newsroom experience different?
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. This was just an offer. You're going to be in LA. Would you come and play, Sam Waterston's wife in the final episode of the final, season of the show ever? Yes. And it was great.
Yeah, that was my sad. I mean, I was sad that Newsroom was ending, but when you showed up, because I had no idea you were going to be in it, I thought, oh, but now she can't come back.
Exactly. Right, back.
Like, no.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, I know people who they have their yearly viewing of The West Wing. They start from the beginning.
Oh, God.
And they go all the way through it.
Oh.
And I'm with them in spirit, but also I don't want to ruin it. I love the show so much that I feel if I overwatch it, it won't be exciting and interesting. Even though I do remember so much. I mean, I can tell you your first episode was Bartlett for America.
That's right.
I will say that I watch Shibboleth every year at Thanksgiving.
Shibboleth is just brilliant.
I watch that and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and it's the ultimate Thanksgiving.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I know. And Bartlett for America Part 2.
So you have mentioned, and I'm happy to pop back to acting roles as well, but I am really fascinated about what led you toward education and teaching and working with artists that way.
When I was doing Into the Woods, I think somebody from Circle in the Square Theater School said, would you come and do a master class? And I had done, I think, the occasional master class when I was living in LA and at other times. And I did, and we made it a kind of a regular thing. Like Fridays, I would do two 2-hour classes or 2 1-hour classes. And it uses everything I know, and it taught me a great deal. And it also showed me that young actors really, it's less about trying to make them talented, which you kind of can't do, but you can help coordinate whatever talent they have and encourage them in a lot of different directions. But it became a kind of therapy, a way of seeing what damage they came with my never asking, because it's none of my business, but seeing what they're covering and seeing where they sell themselves short and what they put forward as their strong suit and what their armor is, and then just kind of gently moving those things around to let them get into a space where there's no old debris and play the character and relate to each other and get out of your own head.
Yes.
And that's what I realized. No, there's a kind of almost like a public service aspect to this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I believe also as a teaching artist myself, we talked about this a little bit before, but I believe so much having had educators who were doing it for the wrong reasons, having teaching artists or teachers, professors, educators who are passionate about doing it to do it, who believe in a nobility in the form in the public service and encouraging arts and coming from a place of love and passion for that, as opposed to just
right. Because. And I really get very uptight with people who cast a kind of side eye at teachers, in general, in universities and colleges, particularly with our quote, you have an agenda, you have a progressive agenda. And I had a fight with a friend of mine, and I said, no, what are you so afraid of? The great schools and the great teachers don't teach your children what to think. They just teach them how to think. And this is what we're missing. We're missing the capacity for critical thinking, for in-depth thinking, for dialogue. That's all. It's all snap judgment. And I must say social media is a large part of what's wrong with everything in the world. But that if we're fear-based organisms, then we lock on to the way certain things have to be based on what we've been told by mostly our parents or whatever. And it gives us, not us, it gives certain people a kind of strength where they feel afraid, but really it's not strength. You know what I mean? It's more armor. And our job as teachers is to disarmor you for an hour and see if you can find more things to think and feel on your own. And what you might understand about somebody else who isn't like you.
I would say my favorite teachers always either answered my question with another question, generally asking me what I thought, or had a discussion with me over somebody who just told me the answer.
Yeah, you really have to find out, what are you thinking? Well, what do you think? Well, what does this mean to you? And, there's another thing I do that where students will get locked at a certain moment and I'll say, what's the matter? Oh, well, I'm afraid. I say, oh, well, afraid of what? Well, I'm afraid I might start to cry. And then I say, and then what might happen? This actually came from a therapist named Arthur Phillips. Arthur, if you're listening, I haven't seen you in 40 years, but Arthur, I'll never forget this. He was a therapist, a friend, and he also flew this little plane. And at that time, I was fearful of flying, and he took me out to the airport. I'm digressing here, and you can edit around this, but he took me to the airport, and he showed me this plane that is no bigger than the size of this dining room table. And this is the thing, and this is the engine, and this is the throttle, and this is the air mixture, and the thing. Here are the flaps and everything. Ready? You want to go for a spin? I went, no, take me home. And so we went back home. And I thought, I've been fine, ever since. But Arthur was a therapist, and one thing he said is, can you take this wall that you've hit and answer the question, then what might happen? What happens in the next minute? So the student would say, I might cry and never be able to stop. I say, okay, and then what might happen? I might stop. Yes, and then what might happen? I might start over. I went, yeah, or any number of possible right answers. But you keep thinking about the next moment and you get unlocked.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Arthur Phillips, if you're listening.
And sometimes I think when you say things out loud, you hear yourself say it and you go, oh, well, that's simple. That I can get over that. That's not as a big deal as it was in my head.
Yes. I mean, I wanted to start a blog, and I even have the kind of cartoon art for it, for the page, called Bear With Me, BEAR, Bear With Me, with a picture of me with a bear literally next to me, because...
Oh, it's your Twitter picture.
It's my Twitter picture.
Yeah.
And yes, and now everybody will know that is I. What I say, and once again, since I'm in the business right now of not stealing stuff as my own, this could have been Arthur Phillips, but it could have been me. I just don't remember. But we would say, if you're afraid to open the door because there might be a bear there, that's anxiety. But if you open the door and there's a bear there, that's fear. Learning the difference between the two things. What bear have you created for yourself? If you open that door, do you think, you know what I'm saying? And save it for when there's really a bear at the door. Save your fears.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've discussed a lot with fellow artists about the concept of boundaries and barriers, and about which one keeps you safe and which one keeps you from forward momentum. Yeah. And which one can be melded and which one needs to be shattered.
Well, the thing is, you can see across a border. You can see across a barrier. But you can't, you can't see, if there's a barrier, you can't see across it. But a boundary, a line in the sand, you know what I'm saying? A border, you can see across. And you can see what it is you think you're afraid of.
Yeah, no, that's so lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, I'll take that one then.
Yeah. So, are there any particular stories or television shows that we have not covered that our audience might like to hear?
Well, I don't really know, because, sometimes we all get together, all of us who've been in shows, and we tell our war stories, and we have a lot of them, and it just makes us remember the other ones. But I actually don't kind of carry them around unless something, kind of tips my memory. I just, if you played, kind of first impression thing with me and said, for example, Diane English, I thought, she's my hero.
Tell us why.
Because she created an environment where I could do good work, but then she said, I'm going to give you an episode of CBS network television to direct from, with no experience. And that is a big, brave thing to do. And she was a big, brave, creative person who had and she was right there, but nobody, stepped on my toes. It was fantastic and kind of groundbreaking because it was back in the 90s. Yeah. And I get to play with my friends. Chip Zion and I, Chip from Into the Woods, remain close friends, have watched each other's kids get married and have babies. We all have these grandchildren. We have thousands of grandchildren running around. And that's kind of thrilling to check in with each other. And there's a community of actors up here where we live in Connecticut. Lots of New York actors and writers and directors live up here, and there's that circle of friends, and that's fantastic. But in terms of funny stories, no, I don't really. I mean, we'd have to be sitting, and I'd have to go, oh yeah, I remember, because I don't really sort of carry it around, in my hip pocket. But needless to say, there are stories I could tell, but it would be unseemly of me. I have to wait till certain people pass on.
Understood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, okay. No, I just realized this is a terrible segue. I was going to ask you to talk about Jay Thomas.
Mm-hmm. Jay was fantastic. He was fast and smart. And, he was the kind of guy who you could get some lovely nuanced performances out of him, even though he's known for being kind of like quick and fast and, and irreverent. I was just shocked as can be to learn that he died. It just was, to me, we hadn't stayed in touch, but every year for however long it was, David Letterman would play the episode of Jay, telling the story about the Lone Ranger. And it was just like, it was a classic. It was the kind of thing where I know this story. I've heard it every year. I'm still laughing my ass off, and he could, I call it being able to make change. You throw him a buck, metaphorically, you sort of throw him a buck and he could flip you. What do you want? 4 quarters? What do you want? 10 dimes? What do you want? Nickels and dimes, because he had it there. He had access to a very funny and very smart brain. And it's a big loss.
Yeah, we love Jay here.
As well you should. He was great on Murphy Brown.
Well, and you're sitting next to probably the world's biggest Jerry Gold fan. So
Hi.
Jerry Gold, the man of your dreams.
I don't know about that.
as he matures, maybe.
Yeah. Yes. But as I was telling you when we were having lunch, and we've talked about this
meal dropper.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm just laughing at myself. We've talked about on the show before is that I had wanted to be an actor. And when I was 12, I looked at things at a very sort of, 1D way. And I thought, great, he is on everything. I will just be a professional guest actor, and then I'm done. Not understanding how more money you get paid for a series regular, not understanding the concept of how hard it is to be an actor. I thought, that's it. That's what I'm going to be. And in fact, I remember telling a friend of mine, I want to be the female Jay Thomas. And she looked at me and went, don't you want to be successful?
Oh, yes. That's cold.
Well, I think that she thought that she was being helpful. I think it's hilarious after the fact, but I was taken aback by that. But she didn't see that as being successful. I saw he's working. He's a working actor.
That's successful. Also, let's factor in how's your life.
Mm-hmm. That too, yeah. And since Jay has passed and he is a big part of Murphy Brown, it's great to talk to people who can, bring him to our podcast.
Yes, of course.
This is not one of your larger roles in your career, but I would love to hear about your experience on one of my family favorite movies, Mr. Holland's Opus.
Oh, that has special meaning for me because there was a Mr. Holland in my life, and that was my high school teacher, John Ingle, who turned out to be the high school teacher of Richard Dreyfuss. Richard and I were in high school. Yes, he was a senior when I was a freshman. In fact, I think I used to kind of follow him around campus, unbeknownst to him. having a little crushlet on him. Richard Dreyfuss and I both went to Beverly Hills High School, and he was a senior, I was a freshman. And we both had this same incredible teacher, John Ingle, who then went on to be on a soap for many years, a big famous soap. And he was kind of, I don't remember which one it was, but he was the one who told me, you're a character actress now. I mean, I played every old spinster you could think of, every ugly townsperson you could think of, that was me. And funny stuff. He said, don't despair. You do this now. You're going to grow into your leading lady and you'll work forever.
That's what they said to Allison Janney too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Mm-hmm. And you grow into it and you never stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I adore her.
And character actors were always my favorite. They were the most interesting.
I mean, every actor is a character actor, unless truly you see somebody who is pretty much just a photogenic blank, and then they have no character, even if they're assigned one. That happens. But the good actors in leads or in subordinate roles are all character actors.
That's a good point.
Well, one of our favorite things to talk about is the fact that we both grew up with these actors who played such a variety of roles and were around for so long through our lives, and those were the people that we looked up to, because there's that idea of if you want a career, you want longevity.
Yeah.
And so the ability to play different types of people, to morph yourself and not just be pretty for a couple years is definitely the goal.
Yeah, it is the goal. It is the goal. And if you look at some of the non-standardized beauties who were the big legendary actors in the 40s, I mean, truly, they became, well, they were shot beautifully, by Harrell or whoever, but Barbara Stanwyck wasn't a traditional beauty. Betty Davis wasn't a traditional beauty, not bombshell kind of thing. They were beautiful because of all of that talent. They were beautiful in how they could tell a story and move you. And, I
enjoyed the concept of the character actor, although yes, there's definitely a stigma to that it's either you're this or you're a character actor.
Yeah. Which is code, of course, for, not pretty enough or not, not famous enough or not sexy enough or whatever the hell, whatever the bleep they've decided it is. And you can carry that around thinking, oh, I'm in that pigeonhole, or you cannot. And you just guide the own narrative of your life. If you're lucky, you just guide the narrative of this is what I want to do, no matter where you do it. Tiny theater somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be, on the main stage. And then somebody could discover, oh, this is a leading lady after all.
Well, and there's that great quote from First Wives Club that Goldie Hawn says about there's the babe, the district attorney, and driving Miss Daisy, and those are your three options.
That's right.
And what's great about the idea of the longevity of being a character actor is that you get to break that stigma. You don't have a certain shelf life for different types. Yeah. And it's great to have more women creating right now, because we are definitely breaking that as far as who leads are. Yeah. But there's, I just got to see Ann Dowd speak.
Oh, fantastic.
This fall. She's incredible. And she just told incredible stories about getting out of, actually the school where I'm in grad school. That's where I got to see her. But she gave this lovely speech about just focusing on your path and what you are doing and being true to yourself. As you watch, you're going to see your contemporaries move at different speeds. That's fine. That's their speed. Move at yours and do what's right for you. And she talks about being older when her quote unquote break happened, but she'd been working the whole time. It's just, this is when people decided to notice.
Of course. Of course. And, I'm writing now, and I have this other show that I'm doing. I wrote a new show, and we've been at Feinstein's twice for two terrific runs in March and July. And I'm going to do it at a big theater up here, the Quick Center in Fairfield in November the 8th, and possibly Los Angeles in February. And it's not a one person show. I have, 7 musicians up there, singers and musicians with me, but I guide the narrative. I wrote the story I want to tell. It's about my folks, and there's a lot of music, a lot of singing. It's very funny, and it's very moving, and it's a piece of material I wanted to do. Yeah. In which I don't think of myself as leading lady or character lady. It's just no difference. I'm the storyteller. I get to tell the story. And likewise, I've written 2 screenplays, and one has kind of received a great deal of interest, and another one I've just finished, and I'm going to shoot a short that I wrote, and I'm just thinking, I'm guiding the narrative. These are the stories I want to tell. This is how I want to tell them. And so suddenly I'm not leading or supporting or anything. I'm the writer. I'm the performer. I'm Joanna. I'm the director. Whatever it is I want, but I think, I'm I'm older than the two of you put together. So I've paid my dues by doing I am, aren't I? I'm looking at you.
Probably.
Look at you with your abacus, like trying to figure out, is that so? Is that so?
I'm like, I'm actually not sure that's true.
But this is the time in life where I have spent, off and on 40 years in the theater, but not consistently, not as much as a lot of others do. But then I've also done TV, not as much as others do, more than some, and then a few movies here and there. And I'm not hungry to bulk up my resume. Mm-hmm. I'm just hungry to do the kind of work I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the great empowering moment of getting to be the storyteller.
Yeah.
And there are so many different ways you can be that person.
Yes. And by the way, teaching is a very good thing for everybody to do.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes I have actors teach the exercise to another actor, and in the very act of teaching them, mm-hmm. they're not self-conscious and they've actually absorbed the information and can pass it on, which means they've really learned it.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, everybody should spend a year teaching.
Well, it's where you figure out where your gaps are.
Yeah.
Well, the second that you either realize you know the answer, mm-hmm. and you're like, oh, okay, I remember that, or you don't know the answer, and then you know where to look.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't have a lot of time, but would you be able to talk about your time doing Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask about that.
Well, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Jeffrey Lane, David Yazbek, two amazing writers and composers, and Jack O'Brien, the legendary mm-hmm. Jack O'Brien, whom I adore, John Lithgow. Let's just start at the top.
Okay.
Yes, because when you have John Lithgow leading the company, everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. I was happy. I was happy every day because John was there. And it was, Greg Jabara and I played most of our scenes together. Mm-hmm. Sherry Renee Scott, Norbert Leo Butz. I mean, this cast was fantastic.
Amazing.
Fun. Lots of hijinks, some of which I can reveal, some of which would bring me up on charges with Actors Equity. But nonetheless, I'm in charge of that kind of, nonsense in the long run. It was great fun.
Now, I know that your character is a composite compared to the movie, but did you watch the movie?
No, I didn't watch the movie.
Yeah.
I've never really learned anything from watching. I've gotten to be the one to be the first person to play a role. Mm-hmm. I didn't create it. The writers created it, but I'm the first one that it's built on in most of the things I've done. And I love that. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's such a great opportunity.
Yeah. I've been lucky.
I was going to say, Muriel in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is quite a delightful character.
She was. She was delightful.
Was it written for you? Because it's very specifically you.
Jeffrey Lane was a friend of mine, and Jeff had written on the Bette Midler show, the short-lived Bette.
Oh, I wanted to talk about that.
We won't spend a lot of time on that, but Bette's wonderful, and it just wasn't the right fit, and yet Jeffrey and I worked together on that, and then so when he wrote this, he did, I think, have me in mind, because a lot of it is very couture fit to the actor.
What do you feel? I mean, I know we talked about a little bit of influence growing up, but I feel that your comic persona is very specific and is very you. Do you know what's behind that? Is it?
I was just, No, I was funny as a kid. Mm-hmm. I was just funny. Also, it's also interesting to look back and see that when your dad is working, up until like 9:30 every night and comes home and he's commuting, or he's in one town and you're in the other, or mom is feeling like blue because dad's out of town for a while, or, when there's that kind of adult stuff that you can't name because you're so little, being the one that makes people laugh, breaks the tension was, I think, kind of got absorbed into me as a kind of job. Do you know what I mean? No burden, but I knew that if I could keep everybody laughing, the fatigue and the logistical exhaustion and the kind of managing, a house and his career and all the stuff and 2 kids and 3 kids, the tension would ease. And so I think that might be the subconscious workings of that, but mostly I just made people laugh because I think things are funny. And I see incongruities and I see ironies in almost everything. And at the lowest point in my life, I was 21 years old. I was in college, and I borrowed a car, and I was at Occidental College in Los Angeles, down in a more eastern part of LA. I was so despondent about something that shall remain private, and I took a long drive, and I drove all the way out to the ocean, and I was really thinking, for 1 second, I thought, I could just drive off the end of that pier. I mean, it was ridiculous and dramatic, because I think every kid, every creative person I know has allowed themselves to, imagine things that are unthinkable and not to be trifled with if they're real as red flags. This wasn't. It was a passing thought. And at the same moment, a seagull landed on the hood of my car and looked at me with this like, what the, who, I can't say it because you'll bleep it, but just, who do you think? What are you talking about? And this bird was looking at me and I started to laugh, and then I just drove back to the campus. And I thought, yes, of course. I mean, of course. Mm-hmm. You're just being dramatic. You're just having a moment. Now, in life, one must recognize if these things start to spiral and as if it's real behavior, but it wasn't. It was late teenage angst and depression and loneliness and the kind of stuff that I got rescued from by being in the theater. Because I knew I had to show up at rehearsal the next night after class. So to a certain extent, having that group of people around me, having the part, having the great input from my teachers and from the rest of the cast was the tonic that lifted my spirits, and I just would love every kid to feel that there's a place they go where they feel included, which is why every kid should be at one time or another in a play.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It teaches you how to work together with people.
Even if you're making costumes, even if you're just painting the sets, even if you've only got 2 lines, you're part of the company. And everybody else in the company should make you feel like you're part of the company.
Well, there's the inherent in the concept of ensemble, whether you're on stage or in tech or directing, that you have to be outside of yourself for a while to work together.
Yeah.
And it brings these skills. And I think everyone should be in an acting class, just even an intro acting class at some point. Because the ability to be not only empathetic to others, but to yourself, to ask questions, to have to step outside and look at something from an emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. But, I'm just thinking here, it can be the chess club. It can be home ec or auto mechanics. Everybody wants to belong somewhere. If they don't feel like they belong with anybody, then they need to belong somewhere where they're expected. It's like the Cheers bar, you want to go someplace where everybody knows your name and just be part of something. And there are so many, and teenage years now are fraught. And again, this is social media and the world we live in, and brain chemistry has altered, I think, I don't know, for whatever reasons, but it seems that in huge numbers, there are so many people on the sidelines who don't feel like they belong everywhere. And everybody else looks like they know what's happening or are all going the same place, but you're not included or are in on the joke. And when you see the person who, is looking like, because I was a new kid 6 times, 6 different moves, the one who didn't know what everybody else seemed to know, but there was someone, and she's my dear friend to this day, 50 some odd years ago, who pulled me in by the arm and said, "You're coming with us." And that changed everything.
Mm-hmm. I agree. There's something about, we've talked about this before on the pod about everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone has this moment where they feel like they don't belong or they shouldn't be there and everyone's going to figure it out. Yeah. But there is that, regardless of what club it is or if it's a team or whatever it is, about finding your little island of misfit toys.
Yes.
And it's empowering.
Yes. And watch out for the ones who think they have it all and don't really care about anybody else and think life is always going to be like that, because it probably won't. And it's cliquish and it's mean and it's difficult out there. I have 7, soon to be 9 grandchildren, and I'm watching them. They're all going to have to navigate this new world, which is certainly new from when I was their age.
Mm-hmm. And for us.
Yeah. And for you too. Yeah.
It's moving quickly. The world is changing very quickly. And so I love these art forms that are truly timeless in many ways, that can really ground everybody to what it means to be human.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And sit around and play Trivial Pursuit and Scrabble and all the board games. Have a night of playing board games and eating
Jeopardy.
Pizza and Jeopardy. Yes. But you have to say what is, or my husband will be very upset.
Well, that's, if anything we've learned from this conversation,
that's it.
That's what we're going to end with.
Answer Jeopardy correctly.
But we're unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you.
This has been wonderful, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
I've had a great time
doing this. Same. And we'll see you for the next edition of FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.